Buenas tardes from beautiful Barrio Huanuca in Matagalpa, Nicaragua. Today's date is 18 de Noviembre of 2025. For the English speakers, that means it's November 18th of 2025. So my Spanish is getting there. A little better every day, a little poco y poco. Want to give an update. So I did get my cedula reissued. That is what you do every 6 months with the national ID card. And I had gone to the local office here in Matagalpa. I was instructed to come back 2 weeks later. That was today. I had an appointment at 2 p.m. I got there about 1:40. I was out the door before my appointment. I literally gave her the receipt that she gave me 2 weeks earlier, the old ID. I signed my name in a book. She gave me the new ID and the canceled receipt back, said she'd see me in a year, because in 6 months, when it's time to do another reissue, it's also time to reapply for the temporary 1-year residency for a pensionado, a pensioner. In the process of doing this, I've been doing some further research because I've talked to some of my other people on the WhatsApp group, other expats that have also filed for pensionado, have retired here within the last few years, so relatively recent, and they were surprised at little things like when I told them when I applied back in May for my residency that I had to make a deposit guarantee equivalent to a one-way ticket back to the States. Had to give them 2 different airline quotes, was not allowed to use Spirit. The tickets had to be in value of over $450. The low quote I had was like $485, so I had to make a $485 deposit with the country. One-time fee. That's in the event that you needed to be ejected from the country or you became indigent and you've got enough money to pay for a flight back. I don't pretend to think either of those situations would happen, so in my mind, I pretty much just considered it a one-time investment of $485 with the country. But with that, there's been some other information that's been kind of conflicting. And again, as you've heard on my other videos, there's no clean-cut website that documents all this. Nor is there great information on the internet, especially from attorneys who advertise on the internet. So if you've heard me on more than one occasion, if you are looking to move down here and you will utilize an attorney for many situations here, buying a vehicle, buying a home, reviewing a rental agreement for an apartment, if you were to file for residency in any of the 3 programs, whether they be pensionado, rentista, or investor, you're going to be using an attorney. If you see an attorney advertising on the internet while you're still in the United States, do not use that attorney. If they advertise they speak English as well, do not use that attorney. You will overpay and probably not get the proper services. I still see numerous attorneys advertise that they do all of your immigration paperwork on your behalf and they go to immigration for you. They cannot. The attorneys are not allowed in the door of immigration. You can't walk in with anybody who is not applying for the residency when you go into immigration. You can't bring an interpreter with you. You can't bring a family member who's not applying. Now, obviously, if you've got a child with you, yeah, you're going to have your child with you, but you can't bring your friend, your buddy, your cousin. You are in solo. So I still see a lot of advertisements about attorneys advertising that they take care of all the paperwork. Well, I've seen some of the quotes. As you know, I did my own paperwork. My attorney pretty much did my notaries, wrote up 2 documents for me, got a couple questions answered for me, and referred me to some other resources. So if you look at the immigration attorneys, particularly the ones in Managua, you'll see rates for, in one of the things you'll need your official documents after they've been notarized or authenticated and or apostilled, is you need them translated into Spanish from whatever language they were originally in, and it's highly advisable you do the translation here by somebody who's been in business for at least 10 years doing so. Well, when the attorneys do that, I've seen billing rates of 20 and 30 cents US per word, and you're looking at multiple pages of documents. I was referred by my attorney to the English Center of Matagalpa here, and the principal, the director of the organization's name is Lester. He does the official translation of documents. He charges $10 US per page Far better deal. I added up the money. I didn't count every exact word, but I had pretty much a word count on my documents. I would have had to have spent over $800 in translation of the original document, the apostille, and or notary. I would have spent hundreds of dollars. Instead, I paid about $120 to get 12 pieces of paper translated. So again, if you're looking to get residency here, do not utilize an attorney you find on the internet. Do not utilize an attorney that advertises directly to you, to your market, that he speaks English and he can take care of everything, because they cannot take care of everything. There's many things they can facilitate, but particularly attorneys in Managua who are advertised as immigration attorneys will often be very overpriced. So with the whole issue of residency, as you all know, I came down here, I got my residency done in lightning fast speed. If you've watched any of our friend Scott Allen Miller's videos, he will strongly advise people against having the emotional attachment to wanting residency without fully understanding what it's going to gain for you. Most people truly don't need residency from day one. It's highly advised, and I agree wholeheartedly that for most people, especially if you've never been here before, you need to be in tourist mode for a very long time before you decide on where you want to sign a long-term lease. And you would sign a long-term lease before you decide to file for your residency, because you need a permanent address for them to do an in-home interview and a place to call home, so they have an address to put on the ID card. Now, I had made prior visits here. I'd been working on my game plan for almost a year and a half before I got here. My decisions for residency were based on a couple different things and information that has now changed. So I'm going to share that information with you, because you cannot find this information clearly and articulately on the internet. Just this year, the end of July, there was a law locally put in place based upon another law that was approved November of 24, that for all intents and purposes has stripped all the perks and benefits of residency for people under the retirement pensionado plan or the rentista plan. The rentista means you have residual income, like from properties. Like I own a bunch of commercial real estate, and this is the rent I draw off of it. I own a couple businesses, and this is the amount of money I charge them, whatever. Versus a investor who comes down here and creates a business and creates jobs for Nicaraguans. So not too long ago, all of the three programs, you would initially apply for residency through the Nicaraguan Tourism Board before the paperwork was handed over to the actual immigration office. They have streamlined that program. Your paperwork no longer goes through the tourism board. Well, what you do not know, based off of information you can find on the internet and even stuff that's dated recently, was that when they did that streamlining of no longer utilizing the tourism board and these perks for moving here and getting residency were being stripped away from all but the investor program. So I came down with the understanding that I was looking at a $20,000 tax exemption on importing household goods. Knowing that and being single, I'd been downsizing for a very long time, but I was also purchasing things for the express point of long-term investments in things I didn't want to try to buy locally that were going to be used in my retirement, which for the most part, other than some sentimental things, like I have one piece of heirloom furniture that my mom bought when I was born. So now it's going on a almost 55-year-old piece of handmade furniture. That has sentimental value. That's something I want to ship here. But as you know, I have a lot of music equipment still in storage. I have a lot of books that you can't find on PDF, you can't find on Kindle, you can't find on the internet, that were never reproduced electronically, and I'm not going to sit there and scan on a flatbed scanner thousands of pages of books. So I have a lot of books in storage. I've got some knickknacks, but I had downsized a lot. So what I do have is equipment for a home theater, equipment for my home studio, and then some sentimental things. Clothes, there's no reason to bring a lot of clothes. One, you don't need your winter clothes here. You need like one set of winter clothes to travel with if you're going back to a cold place when it's cold there. And also weight fluctuates. So what once was fitted properly doesn't fit anymore. So again, I have a whole bunch of stuff sitting in a storage unit. When I signed that lease agreement on the storage unit August of 24, I was being charged $65 a month for the unit, and it's a 10 by 10 foot unit. And currently that price is now $185 a month to store a bunch of stuff that I'm not using at the moment. I can't get here quickly. I really don't have room for in a 1-bedroom, 1-bath apartment. So I don't have a lot of room to place it here. And there's things that I don't want to store in this unit due to the climate. I would much rather wait until I had a long-term home where I'm going to include some air conditioning and dehumidification, particularly like the books. I don't want the books in a high humid environment. I don't want a lot of my electronics in a high humid environment. Mac Mini and the monitor in the back being an exception. All the Apple products, the M1s through the M4s and such, work really great in the heat and humidity. That's one of the reasons that Apple products are recommended down here, is that they hold up in the tropics fairly well. So I have this ever-increasing expense for storing things. I found out I no longer get a $20,000 exemption to ship the things. So whatever I do finally decide to ship here one day, I'm going to do completely out of pocket. The other perk that disappeared was you used to get $50,000 worth of building materials, home improvement materials, tax exempt. So you buy locally, let's say like you want to put in solar. You would buy that locally and you'd get a $50,000 tax exemption on what would normally be about a 15% IVA tax because, for example, solar panels aren't made here, they're imported. Well, if they're imported from China, there's no trade tax to begin with. But let's just say for some reason you were importing particular components of solar, not necessarily the panels, maybe the inverters or something, and you were shipping those in from the U.S. or from Canada, which is a very common place. I know some people that are off-grid here and have brought in their stuff from Canada because they've done the work and the research and they know what's worthwhile to bring here. They would have received the exemption on that and saved themselves the 15% tax import, bringing that in. Again, for a pensionado or a rentista, that program is now gone. The importation of a vehicle, which I've gone over a couple times, it's not worthwhile to ship a slightly used vehicle and still pay a balance tax on it. You're much better off buying a local vehicle, or here, because there is no import tax on Chinese vehicles, buying a Chinese vehicle, Chinese pickup, Chinese SUV, whatever, at about a third of the cost of an equal U.S.-made brand. I am seeing a few more U.S. vehicles here, Chevy Tahoe. So obviously somebody's able to work on them. They're new, and locals, Nicaraguans, are not importing a U.S. vehicle here. So that is being purchased through some dealership somewhere, and they're paying a good amount to get them here, and then they have to have the mechanics that can do the work, the diagnostics, and hook them up to the right computers because everything's computerized in the vehicles now. So those were the three biggies. Now the other things is, if you have residency, it's far easier to buy a vehicle. There are ways to buy a vehicle as a tourist. The most commonly known way is you actually put the vehicle in somebody else's name that is a local. Not something I'd be comfortable in doing, but people do it. Who's to say that you don't have a relative down here or a true trusted friend and that's willing to be involved in potential liability. The other one is you can open up local bank accounts. We've discussed there's not a real necessity for opening up a local account. If you have, for example, Charles Schwab International Debit Card linked to one of your primary bank accounts, then you use that here to withdraw cash when need be, and the ATM fees get reimbursed at the end of the month. So there is no cost to draw the money out of an ATM internationally. You get it all reimbursed. It's 220 cord or $6 US, however you want to look at it, per transaction you do, and then you get that all rebated at the end of the month. I use a good Citibank card that has a lot of perks, used internationally. I use that for almost all purchases when possible. I use cash when required. And I've talked before about the tip system here for food. For a short amount of time, the 10% gratuity was automatically included in the bill. That is no longer the case. There are a few places, like I go to Brooklyn Cafe, they still have the 10% on there, which for me is convenient because that just means I have one transaction. In many places, the tip is separate, and that means I may be able to put my food on the credit card, but I still have to have some amount of cash for the tip, known as a propina. Well, I'm not used to having lots of small bills. The Cordobas pretty much are 500, 200, and 100 note, and you may be leaving a tip between 5 and 30 Cordoba, maybe 40 Cordoba. And I often don't have those small bills. So again, we've talked before about going to the money changers near the banks, known as coyotes, and they will break the large U.S. dollars. Let's say you give them $100 worth of 20s or a $100 bill. The exchange rates at the bank pretty much run about 36.68 as the official exchange rate, which means the ATMs at the bank give you about 36.60 exchange, and the coyote will give me 36.50 exchange, which means he's only making 10 Cordoba on a $100 exchange. 10 Cordoba is about 28 cents US. Their exchange comes out to about 2.7 cents to the dollar. So that's that 36 and change to 1. So you get a little bit of a value. It costs you like 10 cord to be able to get small bills because you can't get change easily here. So there's a few of the things, and I've just run into this information about the stripping of the exemptions. The bigger part of this was, historically, if you were a pensionado or a rentista here, you would do the 6-month cedula reissue. You go in and update the ID by giving them photocopies of your passport pages, so that way they know that you haven't exceeded the amount of time out of country. A copy of the current cedula, which lists your current address, and you pay a fee, which I did, which was more than I expected, but I managed to get it all paid up and everything was great. It was the 4,000 cord came out to like $128 or something for the 6 months. Now that's every 6 months you're updating the ID card, but the pensionado and rentista residency programs are now temporaries. So historically, you would do the 1-year temporary. So the 6 months, you reissue the ID, but at the end of 1 year, you would resubmit new financials, you would resubmit a new health certificate, and a new background check. Well, if I've already been here for the whole year, I don't need to go back through Interpol to show that I'm not wanted internationally. I just need to go to the local police office now, because going to Managua for Interpol is a 2-day event. You go in on a morning and you come back 8 days later in an afternoon to get your report picked up. So that would be 2 trips to Managua to get that. The health certificate, you can get it done at no cost from any of the public clinics here. Or like I did when I had the initial consult with the rheumatologist at Vivian Pellis, you can pay a doctor to do the exam. I luckily had all of my modern annual VA physical information saved on my phone. I had the files for him to review. He saw blood work that I did 2 weeks before I got there. So it was very easy to go through and do a physical with that data. So I just reissued, which means I'm good for 6 months, which means I would reapply in May next year. In fact, May 20th is my renewal date. So I need to gather my financial documents all over again. And if you've watched my initial videos of what a headache it was, and the cumbersome amount of money and time spent to do the simplest of things, getting 4 documents notarized or apostilled and or notarized, I really don't want to go through all that again, and it's time restrained because I need to get these things done. Well, me getting a document notarized, which means I pretty much need to be in the States, and then having it sent off to the appropriate office to get it apostilled, and then sent to an address in Florida where I can get it forwarded. If you remember a few videos ago, I had an unexpected piece of mail show up in my MVO's fast track orders and didn't know what it was. It looked like one of those 3 sides that you rip off, so it could have been like a rebate check, it could have been a PIN number, it could have been whatever. I don't know what it was. So when that got forwarded, there is a law that if you are shipping personal documents, there is a $50 tax. And I've been encouraged that, well, don't send those documents by themselves, bundle them with other shipments of things, and then correctly, it's an import of merchandise and not solely those documents. And so I need to get these documents done. So my financials, I have a retirement statement from the state of Florida. Their fiscal year is July 1st to June 30th. So while I was in Florida last trip, I requested a copy of that. I printed a copy, I went to my bank, had them notarize it, got a cashier's check, mailed it to Tallahassee. I'm waiting for that to be returned to my sister's address, where it'll sit until I go back in February and I'll pick it up. I also had to get new copies of my birth certificates. I had a certified copy I used to get here. They keep all copies. So one, you should never give the true original away, but this was the only certified copy I had, so I needed to request, I requested 2 new certified copies from the state of Illinois. I won't be resubmitting my birth certificate. None of that information has changed, but I do want to have an official legal copy, not just image on my computer. Don't know why, but why I might need it, but I know that I don't have one, so if I did need it, it wouldn't happen quickly. That arrived at my sister's house today, so I'll grab that in February. The other financial documents are federal statements. So if you remember my videos about that, the VA benefits letter that you can download off the internet and the Social Security benefits letter that you can download off the internet do not have a full person's signature block, their printed name, and their wet signature on them. And it was like pulling teeth to get those done. Now, I'm lucky where I live in Florida, the Port Charlotte Social Security office, bless them, they're great. They're understaffed, but they're great people. I was able to get them to do that letter twice, actually give me a wet signature, sign and date it. And I was able to then send that to the State Department, federal, to get it apostilled. The VA benefit letter, you're supposed to be able to get a wet signature from your regional office. Well, due to what was going on in the country in the Wayback Machine, the regional offices weren't open at that time. We just had a shutdown. If you would have tried to have done this last month, they would have had the same problem I did before. And my files, because I used to be a state employee with access to VA databases, are restricted. So my local regional office can't do it. St. Paul, Minnesota is the regional office that can do mine. So I was on the phone with them multiple times, multiple emails, 3 go-arounds before I finally got a wet signature on a piece of paper sent to me. That took 3 months, that I could then turn around and send to the U.S. State Department to get apostilled. And then I didn't get those back in a timely manner. If you remember the video, I literally had to contact Senator Rick Scott, my former boss when he was the governor of the state, to ask, where is my paperwork? The check hadn't been cashed. The paperwork was no longer visible in their tracking system, and nobody could give me an answer other than, we'll just wait, it'll eventually show up. I can't wait, I need these documents. I'm not looking forward to doing all that all over again. And the other issue of that is to update the financials. I need modern dollar amounts. Well, the cost of living increase that happens, announced just a few weeks ago, won't show up until the January 1st payments for Social Security and VA disability. They go into effect in December. Anything effective in December gets paid out at the end of December. And because in the situation January 1st is a federal holiday, we'll actually see that deposit on New Year's Eve on December 31st. So any documentation about updated financials is irrelevant if you're not including the January 1st going forward, because that'd be the numbers that are good for 1 year. Same as my state one. It's July 1st, and it doesn't change until the following July. So I'm waiting for that data to change before I could even request going down that ugly rabbit hole of requesting documents, trying to get wet signatures, sending them back to the State Department, spending ridiculous amounts of money with self-addressed stamped envelopes to get a couple pieces of paper that show that I'm making $6 and $10 more than I did the year before. Your other option in documenting the financials is that you can bring 3 months of bank statements. Well, 3 months of bank statements need to show the current dollar amount, which means I need the January 1st, the February 1st, the March 1st. I will be back in Florida middle of February until the first week of March. So I am literally on my calendar, March 2nd, the first Monday of the month. I will be in my bank requesting them to print, notarize, and provide me 3 months worth of bank statements showing the modern increases of COLA for VA, Social Security, and will show my state pension deposits. I will then immediately turn around and after getting a $30 cashier's check to get 3 documents apostilled, I send those to the state of Florida because they are getting notarized in the state of Florida by a bank in Florida. So it's $10 per document. So it's $30 to apostille. It's going to be about $40 total to get 3 pieces of paper and a cashier's check mailed to Tallahassee, and then the 6 pieces of paper mailed back to my Florida address. Currently, state of Florida is at a month on the one document they already have. I'm hoping that, according to their website, they're backlogged to 3 days after the date of mine was received, which means they should be working on mine right now. But in either case, I'm using the initial benefits letter that I asked to be apostilled, which I may not actually use, but it's better to have it than not need it. I'm waiting to see for the timeline of how long it takes to process, because if I'm submitting this to the state of Florida first week of March and it only takes a month, that means by the second week of April it should be at my Florida address. If it takes longer, it takes longer. But the kicker is my cedula expires on May 20th, and you've been advised to go in 2 weeks before expiration. Well, that means now 14 days prior, I'm looking at May 6th. I may not get the documents until the middle or end of April by airmail through Envios Fast Track. So I'm under a time restraint. Now, one of the nice things about doing the bank statements is I'm going to be back in Florida around the same time every year. So that means so long as I'm there on March 1st, I can grab my documents, get them notarized, send them off for apostille, wait for them to arrive in Florida, and then have them airmailed through Envios Fast Track to me in Nicaragua, so I can go visit Migracion in Managua for the reapplication. I am not certain how much my reapplication cost will be. It will be more than the reissue because there's more documentation happening. But again, a health certificate is not going to cost me anything. The background check with the police should cost very little because there's nothing on me. And then getting these documents, I'm looking at probably about a total of $100 invested in getting 3 pieces of paper to me that are apostilled, so 6 pieces of paper. This is what it's going to take to maintain my residency. So then the question goes, well, what's the value of residency if you've lost all these perks? Well, again, Buddy Scott Allen Miller just addressed this from our WhatsApp feed, just did a YouTube video on it. By all means, check out Scott's. It's the first link on my page about the pros and cons of doing border runs versus the residency. It focused on the border runs part because a lot of people are concerned about how often they have to do a border run as a tourist versus establishing residency. And it's, again, highly advised you stay in tourist mode as long as you can. So when you come down here initially, especially if you've never been here before, stay in tourist mode. You will have 90 days in country on your standard tourist visa that you paid $10 for at the airport. So you got 3 months that you're skating easy. You can then go to the local departmental Migracion office and ask for a 30-day extension. At the end of that 30 days, which means now you're at 120 days in country, you can ask for another 30-day extension, which brings you to 150 days. Now you can do the next one that brings you to 180, so three-month extensions, the initial 90-day. At the end of 180 days, you're not eligible for extensions. You have to cross the border. And that's a hard border, which means you don't get to go to Honduras. You have to either physically go over the border of Costa Rica or fly out of the country as far south as Costa Rica or as far north as Mexico or back to the States. So Hawaii, Florida, Texas, pretty much would be your options from the state side. Now, I just booked with Spirit after being scared with the shutdown because they had cleaned out and wiped out all their January, February flights. And I was getting nervous because I really want to use Spirit. One, I can fly into Lauderdale far easier than I could with Avianca. Lauderdale saves me 30 miles of driving each way from Miami International Airport to the Lauderdale Airport. It reduces the total amount of time in the car, total amount of gas, mileage, all that stuff. Lauderdale even though it's an international airport, it's a smaller airport. It's easier to navigate in and out of. And me personally, I'm not a fan of taking Alligator Alley due west across the state. I tend to go up along the Sugar Highway, and I go up along Okeechobee, and I go through some of the rural towns that I used to work out of, and I get to drive a very scenic, rustic route versus knuckle driving on the alley with some guy in a Lamborghini blowing past me doing 150 in the wrong lane. So I would much prefer using Lauderdale. Well, up until recently when Spirit had started to do their restructures with their 2 bankruptcy filings of this year, they had eliminated many of the flights and all they had was red-eye flights, which means leaving Managua at 11 o'clock at night, which means three hours prior for international. I got to be at the airport at 8 p.m. and it's almost a 3-hour drive to the airport from here. So leaving here in the dark, and it's not advisable to drive here in the dark. There are no street lights on the highways. It's very rural. There could be people walking on that road with no lights. There's animals. There's other cars. There could be a broken down motorcycle. It's not, most people avoid driving at night unless they have to, especially between cities. Well, the red-eye flight. So it would leave out of Managua like 11:30. It's about a 2.5-hour flight. You would arrive in Florida like 1:30 in the morning. Yeah, there's not going to be a huge line for immigration, but you're getting out of the airport about 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning, and then I have about a 3-hour plus drive across the state in darkness, going through either Alligator Alley, where there could be alligators, critters, cars broken down on the highway, or taking the Sugar Highway, which definitely has a greater chance of rural animals being on the road. So I don't want to drive those hours. And going back was the same thing. I would be leaving the U.S. at like 11 o'clock at night. I would arrive in Managua 1 in the morning. Again, everything's shut down. It's pretty quiet. But I'm going to get out of the airport at 2 o'clock in the morning. Good luck unless you've already coordinated a private driver to pick you up at 2 a.m. from the airport for a 3-hour drive home. More than likely, you're going to book a room at a hotel nearby, have them pick you up in a shuttle bus where you're going to take a few hours nap, and then coordinate your travel back. So that means booking hotel rooms on both ends for convenience. Even though the rooms don't cost much, it's just more logistics, and it's just, I'd rather not. So now we have, not only do we have Lauderdale back on the books, it's not just red eyes, they have normal flights again. So I can get in while it's daylight. I'll be driving home at night, but I will be leaving the airport with at least an hour or 2 of sunlight available, which is over half the drive, so that makes things easier. And going back, it's an afternoon flight, and I will have somebody pick me up from the Managua airport, and I'll be back home at like 6 p.m. And again, it's 6 p.m. right now, and it's just now getting dark. So, because again, we don't do a time zone change. It's always the same time here in the central static time zone. No daylight savings, daylight losing. So that is all convenience for me versus Avianca didn't have the most accommodating flights out of Lauderdale. You had to fly through El Salvador and or Panama and or elsewhere, and it becomes a day-long flight to go to Lauderdale, or stick with the Miami flight that I just did. And Miami International is far better than it used to be, but it's still crazy. And the last time when I was getting the rental car and I was leaving the airport at 4 p.m., it was 90 minutes to drive 15 miles. I don't want to do that. So Lauderdale it is. Spirit is. Well, of all things, I just booked a round trip ticket with Spirit for $650 in their first class. So I have leg room. If you know, I've complained with like the chicken buses or on the flights that there's no leg room, and I got 2 fake knees and a bad back, and then that makes me a bad attitude. So to sit there static, cramped, and unable to move for hours on end, again, a 3-hour drive to the airport, a 3-hour wait seated, a 2.5 to 3 hour flight, and then 3 hours in a car. It's a lot of static, non-moving, not easy on the body. So for a 2.5 hour, 2-hour, 40-minute flight to Lauderdale, I bit the bullet and paid for their first class, which means it includes luggage, and I get leg room and all those other things. But I'm paying almost $120 less with the first class of Spirit at the airport that's closer, that has the more accommodating flights, than I would at the moment with Avianca using their middle class, which is flex tickets, which means they're refundable. And it's like mid-grade. It's kind of a business class, but the seats are still tiny. My knees are still smashed into the chair in front of me. They're not bad flights, but they're not comfortable flights. Whereas I've been on Spirit one other time. I didn't do the first class on that one. I did the mid-grade and still had leg room. I was shocked. There was no middle seat. There was just a seat, open spot for us, and then the second seat was, basically they took the middle aisle out on that row. And this time there will be 2 seats, and I'm in the second row because I didn't want to have the wall right there in front of me. I'll have one person in front of me. So I paid for a little bit of the convenience, and it all works to my betterment. The other end of that is, as you know, I sold my truck because there was no reason to keep a vehicle in storage for 5 or 6 weeks visitation per year in Florida, maintaining a registration, maintaining insurance, maintaining maintenance on it, and then having a place to store it that is storm safe. And then you still have, tires that are sitting idle for months on end. So vehicles, if you don't drive them, they tend to break down, unlike decades before where they would actually hold more mechanical ability. The vehicle was paid off. It wasn't worth keeping my truck in storage and paying that month, like paying the storage facility. It wasn't worth it to me, so I sold the truck. Well, now, if you look at a standard rental car, like a commercial, Avis, whomever, disabled veteran, I had American Legion, I got VFW, I'm a former state employee. You can dig for all the discounts you want, and the best prices I could find, not the listed price. Once you add in the insurance, the liability, the taxes, the fees, which more than doubles the advertised price, you're looking at almost $1,000 a week for a rental car. Well, my next trip back to Florida is going to be 3 weeks. I am not spending $3,000 to drive a used vehicle that somebody else owns. It's insane. I would pay like $300 and $400 a month for a car payment. I'm not going to pay $3,000 for 3 weeks use of somebody else's used vehicle. So I've been using the Turo app, Turo. You are renting directly from a private owner from the app's platform. And I have used it with 2 different vehicles. The trip to Lauderdale earlier this year, I was driving in a Lincoln MKZ hybrid. And my joke was that I'm an old, fat, white, bald guy with a beard driving a Lincoln in Florida. That's as much Florida camouflage as you can have. And I'm not speeding, so I'm in the right lane doing the speed limit. So that makes me definitely look older than I am. But my last trip that I was back in Florida for, I had rented a different vehicle. I rented a Toyota Tacoma, that 2022. And I had a Tacoma many years ago, not very old in comparison. So I wanted to see what the modern one was like, because what we have here, the Toyota Helix, is very similar to the Toyota, and it's one of those trucks I would consider in the future buying for someone to take me around and drive me. So I rented the Turo Tacoma 22, had a good time for the week. I just rented with the same owner, the same vehicle for the 3 weeks. I am paying about $1,350 for the 3 weeks, which comes out to $450 a week with the liability insurance and all those things. And the majority of that money is going directly to the owner of that vehicle. It's not going to a corporation. It's not going to Avis. It's not going to, whomever, Ryder. So I'm happy with this app so far. I was happy with the vehicle last time. The program is you tell them where you need to be, what kind of vehicle you're looking for. You see the vehicles available based on location and the dates of availability, and you put in other spectacles of it. And I picked out the vehicle. I said select. I paid up front online. So what will happen is when I land in Lauderdale, the vehicle will be already parked in the parking garage. They will give me detailed instructions of where it's parked. There's a lockbox on it. They'll send me the code. I'll open the lockbox. That gives me the key. Take pictures inside and out before you accept it to show if there's any existing damage. There was existing damage on the truck before. So those pictures showed it was pre-existing. They already, obviously it's their truck. They knew it was there. But you take pictures inside and out before you take off in it, and then you drive it. And then when you come back, there'll be instructions of whether or not you need to wash it. Any vehicle I'm using, I'm going to put it through the car wash the day it's going back, because I've got like a 3-hour drive across the state. So I'd rather it be a little cleaner. You have to top the fuel off before you drop it off, and then when you go to park it, you'll tell them where it's parked. You'll take pictures on the inside and out, submit all that, lock it up, put the key in the key box, and go about your business. But almost half the price of a traditional rental car. So if you're looking to rent a car in the States and you're looking to save some money, you may want to look very well at the Turo app. Again, I've used it twice so far. I'm happy with it. I'm going back to the same owner for the same vehicle for this third one that I'm going to have for 3 weeks, because while I'm in Florida in February, I need to do a trip to Bay Pines, which is up by St. Petersburg. That's about 100 miles from the house. I'll make several trips down to Cape Coral, which is about 25 miles from the house. And then I'll be hitting some of my local favorite restaurants while I'm in town. And I don't plan on doing a lot more driving than that, but I do have a need to drive, and I don't have other people who are retired or off the clock that can just be my personal drivers for weeks on end when I'm in Florida. So this is the easiest way. Also, it's an inconvenience to have somebody drive 3 hours each way to drop me off at an airport and back, because we can't get flights in and out of Tampa, which would still be almost 2 hours each way back and forth. So going across the state from the Gulf Coast to Lauderdale or Miami isn't that much more time than it would be to go to Tampa and back on our side. But unfortunately, the residency program has lost most of its perks. So as I was mentioning, if you wanted to just stay in the tourism mode and do the border runs, you can basically do 2 actual border runs a year at the 6-month and the 1 year. And you could do the monthly extensions, a total, at the 90-day, at the 120, and at the 150. So that would be a total of 6 a year. You could do 6 extensions and 2 border runs without filing for residency. Me personally, I have to fly back to Florida for medication. So I knew I was going to be doing, quote unquote, a border run, but I also knew my border runs for medical purposes were not going to be aligned with exact required timing with residency/tourism here. And I knew this is where I'm moving to, and residency would be eventual. So you don't know how long you can stay in tourist mode before eventually the country says, you know what, you've been here a while, I think you should apply for residency. And I would have to get these documents from the states that I've already done. Doing the initial ones would have been more of an effort. Now, For those who are looking to be investors, you still get the perks. They still do a 5-year card. They do a 5-year permanent resident that you have to renew every 5 years. You still go in and reissue the ID every 6 months, but the application is good for 5 years. Historically, the rentistas and pensionados would do the 1 year update every 6 months, but do the 1 year application. And after the 3rd year, they would then be shifted over to a 5-year permanent residency. That's gone. So there is only a temporary 1 year annual for rentista and pensionado. The question we do not have an answer for is for those individuals who are under pensionado rentista who have already been here beyond the 3 years, currently on a 5-year residency card. When that card expires, do they go back to having to refile annually? We don't know. What I sat and read the very dry, boring, in Spanish, which means I needed to translate, law, and the one that changed because of the new law. So I had to actually cross-reference 3 laws. There are no exemptions. There are no grandfather clause listed. This country is not big on making a lot of exceptions. They would rather leave the laws a little more open to interpretation at the time to accommodate the right reasons, but they don't make a whole bracket of policies and excuses and exemptions from X, Y, to Z. Quite simply, they say pensionado and rentistas are 1 year temporary programs. Not, well, if you've been here a long time, we'll just allow you to be permanent. There's nothing like that written. So we're uncertain how that's going to play out for the others. Just as I told people I had to do the deposit for the plane ticket. Well, I talked to people that had been on pensionado here for 2 years ago. Well, I never had to do that. There may be a requirement when they go to renew that they do have to do that. We don't know, because again, there's nothing in the law that says, well, if you've already been here, you don't have to anymore. It's not written that way. It's just written that from now on, pensionado or rentistas. So again, if you've watched any of Scott's videos, as he encourages people, don't go racing down here and try to establish residency. It's not going to gain you a lot of perks. It's not going to get you any immediate perks right now, other than the ability to buy a vehicle. And you can buy a vehicle and you can drive on your U.S. driver's license, but you won't be able to get your Nicaraguan driver's license until you get residency. But you don't have to have the Nicaraguan driver's license as long as you have a valid U.S. driver's license. Now, if that one expires, now you're hurting. We've had a number of people that had to go back to the States and renew their driver's license in the last year or so, and have had problems getting their cards done stateside. Luckily, mine's good for several years still, and I don't really drive that much. But I would know I will be reapplying for that license weeks before it expires, and I'm pretty sure I have to do mine in person. I know I did the last 2 in person. I don't know if I can do any more of them by mail. I'll find out. But yeah, it's discerning that I don't have all those benefits of shipping things. But I didn't want to, where I'm at logistically, I didn't want to have to do the border runs, because I'm looking at, it's 2.5 to 3 hours from Matagalpa to Managua. Google Maps says it's a 5-hour drive to Costa Rica. Now, I know from Managua to Granada is another hour. Well, that would put me at nearly 4 hours. You can't tell me that you can get from Granada to Costa Rica in an hour. It takes longer than that. So even the conservative number of a 5-hour drive to the border, you need to be there like at dark 30 in the morning to get over quickly. And supposedly it's about an hour process if you're just going to go over the border and come back. You have to pay fees to leave, pay fees to enter, then pay fee to leave, and pay fee to enter, and then do your 5+ hour drive back. You are looking at a minimum, and that's without restroom breaks or meals, you're looking at least a 14-hour day. So realistically, this would be a 2-day adventure to do a border run if you're doing the extensions. And again, I fly back at various times to Florida based on medical appointments and such, so I wouldn't be able to guarantee I was going to fly back at an appropriate time that resets my clocks. and I hadn't done the extensions as a tourist because I flew back at the end of March. I got here in February. I flew back at the end of March. That gave me a new 90 days. So if you do a border run, you go back to the 90 days count out. If you stay the 90 days, then you have to do the 30-day extensions or fly out or go down to Costa Rica and reset the clock. So for myself, knowing where I was going to live in the country, not have my own vehicle, I didn't want to do the border runs. I'm not opposed to going to Costa Rica, but where I am in the country, it's a much longer ride than if I was living in Managua or living in San Juan del Sur or living in Granada or even with Leon. So for me, this was my decision. I still made a good decision for myself based on my situation. But again, it's disheartening that I don't have the home goods shipment discounted, because I've already got it down to I could fit everything in less than a 10-foot by 10-foot container. Unfortunately, you can't ship a 10-foot shipping container international. They're too small. The smallest you can ship is a 20-foot container. So I'd be sharing that container with somebody else. I wanted to buy my own container because I wanted to use one for the home studio. Well, that would mean I have to wait until I have property to be building on before I could ship it all. And I'm paying almost $200 a month right now for the storage facility. So a lot of whammies on that. I may very well be selling off some stuff on every visit back to Florida and making that container much smaller, to the point where maybe I pull the plug on the container altogether and just have a corner of a family's garage space, which I could have tried to do before, but nobody really has the space other than my father, and he's hopefully going to sell his property. He's got more property than he can use himself by himself, and with all the storms, I don't trust the houses. We've had significant damage due to multiple hurricanes over the years. The storage facility I was using, it was on the second floor, so not immediate flooding concern unless they lose the metal roof, which is a potential, considering we're getting Cat 4, Cat 5 storms more frequently now in that area. There is no true safe place. It's not like just going into the middle of the state like once before, because the storms that they had in 22 flooded out the middle of the state. So I will probably downsize even greater in what I had to bring more stuff here in the future. But yeah, I wanted to give that attention. So as many of you were kind of taking notes on the residency program, you will not find this on modern websites unless you want to go to the Nicaraguan government's website and then read through many pages of Spanish legalese and then try to triangulate between three different laws how this pertains to you. There's not a lot of benefits any longer for residency. I would highly encourage, especially if you haven't been here, stay in tourist mode as long as you can until you find a place that you want to live, and then sign your lease. And you can still be in tourist mode. You can sign a 1-year lease and fly back in and out, go do border runs, whatever. And if you decide that this is your forever home, or at least your forever home for a very long time, and you want to bite the bullet and do the residency, you've got all the information of the day that I've posted in the last 8 months of what it takes to get residency here as a pensionado. But again, as I've said before in the other videos, this information is fluid. The government is fluid. The information I'm getting is the information of the day. I just went to do the reissue, was initially told that I had to wait for information from Managua on how to pay them, when in fact, when I went there, I was paying them directly. I was originally told only show up at Migracion 1 day prior to expiration, and I found out I need to be there 2 weeks before expiration, because there's only one ID card printing machine in the whole country, and it's in the capital. So when people do renewal reissues from the departments, all that gets mailed in to the centralized office, and one machine is printing all the ID cards for the country. Hitting up on the 54 minutes. So I do want to give a shout out. Again, the local Migracion office here in Matagalpa is completely understaffed with a rock star of an employee. The woman working there is absolutely great. She's got a great demeanor. You can tell that she's very good at her job, but she is supporting the equivalent of a county of 175,000 people population in a city of 120,000. She is a one-woman show. The people at Migracion in Managua were absolute rock stars, who I will be seeing in May. So the government employees here have been great. I thank them for their assistance. And again, my language barrier doesn't help, but my Spanish is getting a little better. Still waiting on some stuff from MVO's Fast Track due to the federal shutdown, which affected Customs, Border Patrol, affected airline traffic, traffic controllers, and the flights being canceled. I have orders that were delayed in shipment. I've got stuff that was delayed through the water port. Supposedly in 2 more days, I'm going to get a whole bunch of stuff here. I did get the music gear benches set up. I have the backside of the synthesizers plugged in correctly. I am still working on getting the proper sound out of the wires from the front end of the equipment correctly. I do have the computer funneled through the audio interface funneled to the speakers, and I can get sound from the computer to do that. But at the moment, I haven't been able to figure out what is wrong with getting the sound from the synthesizers and or the keyboards through the audio interface to the speakers. So I'm still working on that. There will be a video, hopefully before Christmas, of a fully functional 6 synthesizer, 2 keyboard, MacBook Pro, studio monitor speaker setup. And with that, I wish you all well, and audio.